Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 3 2025 NFL predictions. Well, before I get started with everything, I did want to mention that at least this week, the reason why the video did not come out yesterday was because I couldn't make it in time before I had to go to work. And obviously, I did want to say that next week for the Week 4 video, the Week 4 video will be also coming out on a Tuesday as well, just because of the timing with the schedule with my job. So I just wanted to let that out there. From Week 5, after moving forward, I will let everybody know on a week-to-week basis when the videos will come out, or if you see the video come out Monday, I will let people know. But every week moving forward, I will let you know if the videos are going to come out Monday or Tuesday, or maybe even the latest Wednesday, depending on what time due to my work schedule. But I did want to say I had a very good bounce-back week this week in both my against the spread and straight-up picks. So last week, against the spread and straight-up, I had winning weeks in both departments. Against the spread, I went 9-7, which equals 56.3%, and straight up, I went 13-3, which equals 81.3% straight up. So a fantastic week. Happy to have a winning week on the board for my against the spread picks. For my straight up picks, a 13-win week after an 11-win week. Double-digit wins is the goal every week when you do straight up picks, and they hit two for two on that. Very thrilled with that. But now overall for the year, through 32 games against the spread, I'm now 14-17-1 against the spread. And straight up now I am 24-8 through 32 games. So that equals up to 45.3% against the spread. And straight up now I am 24-8, which equals 75%. So my against the spread percentage, I will take that. It's not the most thrilling percentage. I always seem to do this every year, that I tend to make it where that when you have this against the spread moments here, I always seem to put myself in a hole, which stinks. But, being 14-17-1, having a winning record already through week 2, I will greatly take that moving forward with several weeks to go. And straight up, though, 75% overall. That's a fantastic percentage through 2 weeks so far in the year. Out of the 8 losses, so many of them were close ones. I think only 2 of them, or 2 or 3 of them, were decisive games where I really had no opinion or no say in how the game went. But to be fair, out of my 24 wins, there have been plenty of close calls that went my way. I've gotten more breaks so far through 2 weeks compared to non-breaks. But being 24-8 through 2 weeks is fantastic, and I hope to continue to improve my straight-up percentage by the week. So definitely a great way to start off the first 2 weeks in terms of straight-up picking. But it was a wild week too. So many crazy games, so many bizarre moments. Cowboys Giants. If anybody watched that game, what an absolute shootout between Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson throwing 3 yards shy of his career high in passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Malik Neighbors looking like an absolute beast and the best receiver in football, which was impressive. So many unique moments in that game, even though Russ did cost him the game at the end with the interception, which was a terrible throw. It looked very Favre Eagles 2003-esque, where he just threw it up, and Donovan Wilson had the easiest pick of his career. I was doing a shout-out to Brandon Aubrey for making a 64-yard field goal. Looked like a chip shot, and I would say this, anybody out there, he's the best kicker in football. And honestly, after what I've seen out of Brandon Aubrey making his kicks, he might be the best pure kicker of talent that I've ever seen. Because the way he makes 50, 60-yard field goals with ease is an absolute weapon, and it's an insane thing to watch on a weekly basis. But, that was a, crazy performance. Bills, Jets, that wasn't a great game, but the Jets, my God, talk about crapping all over the goodwill that you had in week 1 when you had a dominant, when you had a competitive game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and everybody thought that you had a positive moving forward with the offense. Boy, did Justin Fields look like the Justin Fields that I kind of expected him to play as. And to be fair, I do not think he's that bad, but the Jets definitely, if you thought you were turned up to 11 with the Jets after week 1, you pretty much turned back down to 0 after that performance. You had to flush out everything good that you thought after week 1 after watching how bad that week 2 performance was. The Bills handled their business. James Cook, another 100-plus yard game. Josh Allen did enough offensively through the air. He did have the 1 touchdown. Fortunately, he came back in the game with the injured nose. The Rams played a good game against the Titans, pretty solid. Puka ran well. Devontae Adams had 100-plus yards. The Rams defense is holding up pretty well. I do want to say that I am concerned about their secondary, especially with Akila Witherspoon breaking his clavicle, so he will be out an extended amount of time. But, I thought the Rams played a very good game, and I still think they are one of the top 3 teams in the NFC behind the Packers and the Eagles. Speaking of that game against the Chiefs, first time in about 11 years that the Kansas City Chiefs are 0-2 to start the year. It's only the second time in the Andy Reid run. First time in Patrick Mahomes' career he's lost 3 straight games. I do think the Chiefs, they should be fine for the playoffs, and then once that happens, once they get fully healthy, who knows? But I don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl, and I don't think they are going to win the AFC West because I think the Chargers, with their schedule and having the home win against the Chiefs already, I think they should be able to hold on with that schedule the rest of the way through. But I do want to give the Eagles credit. 3 straight wins against Patrick Mahomes. Incredibly impressive, even though, again, the offense is a grind to watch. That is a terrible offense to watch. It's not fun. It's grinding. But to be fair, the Eagles now have won 17 straight games where Jalen Hurts has started, and they're 18-1 in their last 19 games. Chris Jones, respect the heck of you as a player, but I guess in this moment, sit down and shut your butt up trying to yell at Jalen Hurts about his stats, because at the end of the day, to quote Jameis, he was eating a W while you took a big fat L, because of Travis Kelce giving the ball to Andrew Mukba on the pick that basically won the game. So the Ravens beat the crap out of the Browns. That was odd for about the first 60% of the games, but Kevin Stefanski's a clown. Anybody that believes in this guy is a coach. He's overrated. He's not good. He's going to get fired. Andrew Berry deserves to get fired. They need to put Dylan Gabriel in the game so then we can get the Shador, and he can go through the games. I don't know if nobody on the Browns is outside of Myles Garrett, who was ticked off that he lost, which, by the way, I don't want to hear that from Myles Garrett. You got 40 million reasons, buddy, to sit there and shut up and be pretty. I don't need you complaining about losing. You could have left. You asked for the request. Take your butt kickings like a professional and move on and enjoy your, paychecks. I don't need you hear you complaining about how sad it is that you got your rear ends kicked, or you knew you were on a team where you were going to get your rear end kicked more often than not. And I'll talk about some of the other games too, but I guess some other quick observations. The Dolphins kind of came competently back. I have to give the Dolphins credit. They played a much better overall game. But the Pats at the end of the day with their special teams, Antonio Gibson, the MVP with back-to-back rushing and return touchdowns, basically won them the game. Huge error by Achane stepping out of bounds. And I think the Dolphins, where they had some false sense of hope here, I think this Thursday, the game on Thursday, is going to put them right back in the reality of where the Jet game is going to be the Waterloo moment for the Dolphins, to where if they somehow lose to the Jets next Monday night, I think it's time to fire Mike McDaniel and just blow this whole thing up and just tank for the number 1 pick and move forward from there. So, and I'll talk about the rest of the other games as well as I get to my picks now. But those were just some of my quick thoughts on some observations. All right, but now it's time for my picks. So on Thursday, speaking of that game, when the 0-2 Miami Dolphins travel to Buffalo to take on the 2-0 Buffalo Bills, the Buffalo Bills are 12.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Buffalo here, minus 12.5, and Buffalo straight up. And then on Sunday, when the 2-0 Green Bay Packers travel to Cleveland to take on the 2-0 or the 0-2 Cleveland Browns, the Green Bay Packers are 8-point favorites in this game. Give me Green Bay here, minus 8, and Green Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-0 Indianapolis Colts travel to Tennessee to take on the 0-2 Tennessee Titans, the Indianapolis Colts are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Indianapolis here, minus 3.5, and Indianapolis straight up. Then the next game, in the weird now backup bowl after the injuries to Joe Burrow and J.J. McCarthy, in the Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz game, when the 2-0 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Minnesota to take on the 1-1 Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Minnesota here, minus 3, and Minnesota straight up. Then the next game, when the 1-1 Pittsburgh Steelers travel to New England to take on the 1-1 New England Patriots, the Pittsburgh Steelers are slight 1-point favorites in this game. Give me Pittsburgh here, minus 1, and Pittsburgh straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-0 Los Angeles Rams travel to Philadelphia in a rematch of the NFC divisional round from last year to take on the 2-0 Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Philadelphia here, minus 3.5, and Philadelphia straight up. Then the next game, when the 0-2 New York Jets travel to Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay's home opener to take on the 2-0 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Tampa Bay here, minus 7, and Tampa Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 1-1 Las Vegas Raiders travel to Washington to take on the 1-1 Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Washington here, minus 3.5, and Washington straight up. And I'm going to say this is a full pick of Washington, regardless of the Jaden Daniels status. And I'm going to stick with the spread pick as well. So if it's Daniels or Marcus Mariota, I'm going to take Washington to win this game on the spread and outright, regardless of who's starting at quarterback. All right, then the next game, when the 1-1 Atlanta Falcons travel to Carolina to take on the 0-2 Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons are 5-point favorites in this game. Give me Atlanta here, minus 5, and Atlanta straight up. Then the next game, when the 0-2 Houston Texans travel to Jacksonville to take on the 1-1 Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars are slight favorites in this game. And one of my one of my 3 outright upsets of the week, I'm going to take Houston here, plus 1.5, and Houston straight up. Then the next game in an AFC West battle, when the 1-1 Denver Broncos travel to Los Angeles to take on the 2-0 Los Angeles Chargers. Los Angeles Chargers are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Los Angeles here, minus 2.5, and Los Angeles straight up. Then the next game in the 0-2 New Orleans Saints travel to Seattle to take on the 1-1 Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks are 7.5-point favorites in this game. In my only hedge of the week, I'm going to take Seattle here to win straight up, but I'm going to take the New Orleans Saints to cover, plus 7.5. Then the next game, when the 1-1 Dallas Cowboys travel to Chicago to take on the 0-2 Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears, surprisingly, even though I know it's going to be kind of a weird expected shootout, the Chicago Bears are slight 1-point favorites in this game. In my second slight, outright upset of the week, give me Dallas here, plus 1, and Dallas straight up. Then the next game, in an NFC West battle, when the 2-0 Arizona Cardinals travel to San Francisco to take on the 2-0 San Francisco 49ers, and one of the more tricky games of the week due to the Brock Purdy injury. The San Francisco 49ers are 1.5-point favorites at home. In another slight upset here, I'm going to take Arizona here, plus 1.5, and Arizona straight up outright to win. In the next game, the Sunday night game, when the 0-2 Kansas City Chiefs take on the 0-2 New York Giants. Nobody would have thought those two teams would be equally with the same record in kind of an odd, desperate situation. But the Chiefs are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me Kansas City here, minus 6, and Kansas City straight up. And lastly, in the Monday night game, when the 1-1 Detroit Lions travel to Baltimore to take on the 1-1 Baltimore Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me Baltimore here, minus 6, and Baltimore straight up. All right, stop my quick thoughts on each game. The Buffalo Bills over the Miami Dolphins. This game, folks, it's not that hard. Look, the Buffalo Bills, to me, have been, at least for this season so far, have been the best team in football. Overall. Like, Josh Allen has played very good, consistent football. The offense, you could argue, yeah, they settled for a lot of field goals. That was tough. But that Bills defensive line did not have Ed Oliver on Sunday, and they just absolutely rolled the New York Jets offensive line. Fields only threw for about 30 yards. Tyrod, had about 40 at the end, but it was just an absolute drumming. And I believe in this rivalry between the Dolphins and Bills, I believe Tua Tagovailoa has only one career win against the Bills throughout his career, which is insane. I guess it's fortunate that it is a night game and they're going out to Buffalo in the late September, so it's not like December where it could be bone-chilling cold. But after what you've seen out of the Bills and the Dolphins through 2 weeks, the Dolphins, I do have to give them credit, and I do want to shout out Tyreek Hill for finally having a reception over 30-plus yards. First time in over a year he was able to do that. He did have a 100-yard game. Tua did have 2 touchdowns, and the offense looked more confident and effective, but the special teams killed him. And it's just where I just think with the Dolphins and Bills that, like, this game for the last several years, even under Mike McDaniel, really have never been contests. And I feel like the Dolphins had more of the sights of week 1 than week 2. And I think the Bills are going to put them in their place to where you're going to look at the Dolphins, like I said, they're going to kind of get rolled here. And that's why it's crazy that, like, I'm taking the 12.5-point spread, but it's like if that Dolphins defense couldn't stop Danny Dimes or Drake May, and they could both put up 30-plus points, the Bills with their talent and with Josh Allen playing the way he is can easily do the same thing. And I just think the Bills will fundamentally, comfortably at home get a nice dominant win. Could the Dolphins be competitive? Sure, it's a division game. Who knows? Josh could be dealing with his nose injury as well. They still might not have Ed Oliver. I don't think that matters at all. I think the Bills just kind of roll through and get another easy win before getting to the easiest one of the year, playing the Saints next week. But that's why I'm taking Buffalo here, minus 12.5, and Buffalo straight up. The next game, the Green Bay Packers over the Cleveland Browns. This game, very much like Miami Buffalo, not that much to talk about here. Like the Packers, to me, have earned the right to be the second best team in the NFC. They have got a dominant win over a spunky Lion team that on Sunday proved that they're not gonna, the demise of the Lions offense, to misquote Mark Twain, was greatly exaggerated. But the Packers, the Jaden Reed injury is big. That's unfortunate. They do have some offensive line issues as well for some of the injuries they had. But the Packers' offense and defense should be able to roll a Browns team that, Judkins played well, but they really can't stop anything defensively. Jacobs should be able to run really well. The Browns just feel like they're just going through the motions of this year. Nobody had any expectations, but Kevin Stefanski, the clown that he is, just doesn't, I feel, have any pulse of this team. And you could say, he was a, two-time coach of the year, and this guy, was like, oh, man, he's a great coach. Or we really need to listen to him about his wisdom of why Shador or Gabriel's not starting. No, we don't. He's a clown. Andrew Berry, a local guy that's from my neck of the woods, looks like an idiot. And this Browns organization is going to be in the number one pick conversation again, and I think both of their heads need to roll. Because this Browns team is not competitive, it's not respectable, it's awful. And I think the Packers are just, once again, going to put a boot right up their rear ends, and it's just going to be another miserable day in the land for the Browns fans to watch. As the factory of sadness continues to churn out another awful game for the Browns. I guess if Judkins plays well, if they can get a pass rush, could the Browns be competitive? Sure, but I don't think anybody sees what the Packers have, even with the injuries they suffered at receiver, the lack of depth. I just think people think the Packers should be able to fundamentally get a good win, especially with Micah Parsons rushing the passer as effectively as he is. He's my defensive player of the year so far 2 weeks as well in this one. So that's why I like Green Bay here, -8, and Green Bay straight up. The next game, the Indianapolis Colts over the Tennessee Titans. This one to me comes down to the Colts have been, through at least the first 2 weeks, probably the biggest surprise that I've seen in the league. When you watch the Colts play football, the defense is sound in, solid ways. They don't really commit a lot of penalties, but it's just where, I think the biggest jump that you can see, and it's probably the biggest indictment on Anthony Richardson's career, is that Daniel Jones, who was 4-13 in his last 17 starts before coming into Indianapolis and winning the job against Anthony Richardson, they've put up 61 points in 2 games. They're averaging 30.5 points offensively a game. They were the first team in NFL history to score in their first 10 consecutive drives. No team had ever done that in NFL history. This Colts team is a good, fundamental, sound team that Shane Steichen is pushing Daniel Jones with the offensive talent around him, and he understands the system. He has a good amount of mobility, but the Colts are going to be hanging around to the end of the year, and even though I still have the Texans winning the AFC South, the Colts can very well earn a wild card spot. They just beat the Broncos. They beat the tar out of the Dolphins. They are going to win enough games. They can win enough games that you can objectively see this Colts team, even if the Texans win the division, winning a wild card spot. Because I just think the Colts are a fundamentally sound and consistent team. And again, with the Titans, like I was saying before, I watched the game against the Rams. They played okay. Cam Ward had that great throw to Eilman, which was a great highlight play, but he didn't have a sharp second half. Calvin Ridley looks lost. L'Jarius Sneed was getting burned by Devontae Adams. There's a lot of money on that Titans defense and offense that you can just look at guys and go, overpaid, not playing well, doing horribly. Also, by the way, any Titans fans out there, shout out to Keith Bailey. Go check out the Locked On Titans podcast with Tyler Rowland. Very good guy, entertaining, podcaster. He's been covering the team for years, and I guess I've enjoyed the entertainment. I guess just watching him rage over the Titans. But he is very knowledgeable at what he does. But I just always have a rule until a rookie quarterback can win his first game, I can't take that rookie quarterback to win until I've seen him do it. And I just think the other big gap I see here is that there's just a significant coaching disadvantage between Brian Callahan and Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen's a good, solid coach, and he's doing wonders with Daniel Jones. And I think the Colts hold on and get, another, good win that puts them at a 3-0 start. And I think the Colts, they're kind of in the Rodney Dangerfield area of the no respect. I think you look at the Colts and go like, okay, they're good. And I think it's like the Colts are going to be competitive every game the rest of the way through. Like, I think the Colts, they're going to win more games than you think, and they're going to be in every single game with the way this team is playing sans injury. If Daniel Jones does go down, then the Colts are screwed, because then I think Anthony Richardson just puts everything back to zero. And, you start from there. But I do want to say, I will cash in a Danny Dollar, but I think Colts fans need to be careful. Enjoy the Daniel Jones drive, enjoy the high, but once the end of the year comes, I'd rather tag him than give him the long-term extension after 1 year, because I don't know if this is going to be something that's sustainable, or maybe hopefully he can take like a Baker Mayfield type deal, because if you give him another $40 million contract, you just sunk the franchise again. So, but that's like Indianapolis here -3.5, and Indianapolis straight up. The next game, the Minnesota Vikings over the Cincinnati Bengals. This game, because of the injuries that happened, I just want to say, first of all, my best wishes to Joe Burrow as he suffers one of the worst cases of turf toe that I've heard of. Apparently, I found out, I don't know if any, weird fun fact of the day from Matt the NFL Fanatic. But apparently, you carry most of your weight when you're walking, 60 to 70% of your weight in your big toe. So, when I heard that he suffered turf toe in his big toe and how significant it was, I was objectively shocked how much, how much that meant. But I do want to say, Zach Taylor, the offensive line, the Bengals have tried to put investment in that offensive line. It hasn't worked. Joe Burrow's been getting knocked around for the past 6 years of his career, and you just can't trust his health. But I am going to be you can call me a hot take artist here, but, I don't think after this injury, especially with him now taking surgery, Joe Burrow is not a top 5 quarterback in the league. I'm sorry. Joe Burrow, you have to have regret and concern, if you're a Bengal fan, for giving Joe Burrow $275 million. You just have to. It's weird because it's like, but at the end of the day, I know Jordan Love's had a little bit of an injury history, but it's not as bad. If you, I would tell you this right now, Jordan Love's $55 million contract is better than Joe Burrow. Jordan Love's future and outlook is much better than Joe Burrow's. And I would take Jordan Love moving forward today than Joe Burrow because of the injuries. And, and again, even though, Jake Browning played an admirable game. Jamar Chase did end up with, I believe, 165 yards receiving. They were able to run the ball, but the idiotic Duval man also gave them the game by giving them by not taking a field goal when they were up 3 after the turnovers. And in the Vikings, it was where that, like I mentioned earlier, the 1-game high, or the 1-quarter high of J.J. McCarthy having 3 total touchdowns in the fourth quarter evaporated quickly, and that was an awful performance. If you take out that 1 quarter, he has played 7 pathetic, dreadful, turnover, sacks, quarters of football, to where, I honestly felt this game, even, when Joe Burrow was down, I objectively thought, before I heard JJ got hurt with his ankle sprain, I thought that, this game was going to be easy, because I thought Jake Browning was that much better of a quarterback than J.J. McCarthy. If it was Joe Burrow and J.J. McCarthy, I don't think anybody would have taken the Vikings to win, especially after what you saw from the Vikings. But now that Carson Wentz, a veteran who is going to make NFL history this week by being the first quarterback to start for 6 different teams in 6 consecutive years, which is crazy to think about. It's credit to Carson, but he's getting on his Josh Johnson, Ish Smith type run of teams. But with Carson Wentz, and look, this game, and I will be brutally honest here, this is a game where I honestly don't really care. Where I think anybody that picks this game straight up, I'm not going to criticize you because honestly, I don't know who's going to win. I know a lot of people, they are taking the Bengals. They're looking at the Aaron Jones injury. They're looking at Carson. But I'm I can't take Jake Browning in this spot. Jake Browning has not played terribly. He was 4-3 with 11 TDs and 7 picks 2 years ago when Joe Burrow went down the last time with the wrist injury. But this is a Brian Flores defense, and I just think I'm going to take, and I know Aaron Jones is probably going to be out due to his hamstring injury, but I would tell people, I'm going to take the Vikings based off the quarterback and Jake Browning's challenge, okay? The Bengals defense hasn't been great. It wasn't great last year. I know it was great week 1, but Trevor and them had their moments. They basically won the game off turnovers. Trevor didn't have those turnovers. The Jags probably won that game. But in that moment, I don't think Jake Browning in this spot going against Brian Flores will be able to handle the pressure better than Carson will against the Bengals defense. The Bengals probably have more talent healthy, around compared to, like, Carson. But I think the quarterback should be able to out-trump the rest of the talent in this game. Last week, and sometimes when you make these picks, it works out, it doesn't. Last week I took the talent over the quarterback, where Michael Penix has obviously been better than JJ has, and I was wrong. So I'm going to go with the quarterback this time over the roster talent. It's about a push, but I'm going to take the Vikings here. They're at home. I trust Carson more, and I think Jake Brown is going to just have a harder matchup against the Flores defense than I think Carson will against the Bengals defense. So that's like Minnesota here, -3, and Minnesota straight up. But again, that's the first pick I've ever had in a very long time where honestly I'm not going to, if you tell me the Bengals are going to win, I don't think I'm going to be mad. I'm again, like, the Bengals could win. It's a genuine toss-up that nobody really can predict off of what's going on. So, next, that's what I like. Minnesota here, -3, and Minnesota straight up. The next game, the Pittsburgh Steelers over the New England Patriots. This game right here is a game where I'm taking the Pittsburgh Steelers based off of the the defensive lapses I've seen out of New England. They're just something where, like, and I know, look, Pittsburgh's defense has actually absolutely been shredded by Justin Fields' offense and Sam Darnold's offense, and the fact that they couldn't capitalize off the 2 picks from Sam Darnold, which were all 4 interceptions, really is a testament to how inept the Steelers' offense is. Also, Caleb Johnson had one of the all-time blunders of the year so far when he just let the kick go through his hands. And he was just like, well, nobody, I can't cover the ball. That was a live football, and that was basically the turning point in the game. Seattle got the touchdown. They were up 10. They pretty much held to a 14-point game at that point. And I just felt that the Pittsburgh Steelers, for a storied franchise that spent so much money defensively, it's alarming how bad, and I know the injuries have piled up. Joey Porter's been hurt. Highsmith got hurt. Deshaun, like, the Steelers defense is banged up, and I know it's becoming more of an infamy war as you watch them. But the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, man, like, you need to play better, because it's just like you can't expect Aaron Rodgers at 41 years old to play the game against the Jets defense. Which, again, let's be fair, kind of like with the Bears, you're watching the Jets defense, you're going like, yeah, that's what the Jets seem like they're going to give up to everybody if they have a competent enough offense. And look, Pittsburgh, New England, Bill Belichick, I believe, had a 9-3 record against Mike Tomlin throughout his career, even, the Patriots have routinely, through all the different iterations, have been able to beat the Steelers more often than not. With Drake May, the offense looked better. They were able to run the ball. Ramondre Stevenson looked like a solid wide receiver. But in this game, I'm going to take the Steelers just because I'm going to trust the offense of the Steelers. If both defenses play as bad as they've shown to play, I will trust Rodgers to outshoot Drake May. I wouldn't be surprised if the Pats won because, again, maybe, Drake's got some athleticism. He's younger. They have to go out in the cold. If the Pats, can't really run the ball. But I'm going to just take the better quarterback, the more kind of experienced offensive weapons. And I've seen Pittsburgh win a shootout. And I saw New England win a shootout. But I guess I'm going to trust Rodgers over Drake May in this type of game from what I've seen. So, but that's all like Pittsburgh here, -1 and Pittsburgh straight up. The next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Los Angeles Rams. This game to me it was very hard because this game comes down to me to where I believe the Eagles' offensive line should be able to win the game based off their protection. If they can withstand that Rams defensive front, that Rams secondary where it's been effective, it's not very good. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, there is an Ahkello Witherspoon injury where he broke his clavicle, and he's going to be out an extended amount of time. That was arguably their best corner on defense. And again, I guess I know what people are going to say. The question is going to be, can Jalen Hurts, who has only had 2 10-plus yard completions the entire season so far, can he capitalize on that weak secondary? I don't know if he will, but I also just think that, look, Saquon Barkley was the biggest reason why in the last year the Eagles got their wins against the Rams at both the regular season game in LA and the postseason game in the divisional round. I think if the Rams pull a Chief moment and say, okay, we are going to sell all out to stop Saquon Barkley, I think Jalen, that line can hold up, should be able to find some good matchups with Devontae and AJ against that weak Rams secondary. Also, I just think, look, Quinion Mitchell, the number one corner for the Eagles, Puka Nacua should have a tough day. Devontae Adams should have a field day, as from what people have talked about watching Adoree Jackson play corner at this point, and he's routinely getting beaten by every number 2 receiver in the league. And again, I would tell you this. Am I going to be surprised if the Rams win this game? Not at all. I think very highly of the Rams. I honestly kind of want the Rams to win so I can tell people the Rams are better than the Packers. But, I think in this moment, the Rams are a very good quality opponent, but just looking at the matchups and looking at the ideas and the possibilities, I just think the Eagles' offensive line, all they have to do is maintain and hold off the Rams' pass rush. If they can do that, if Jalen can use his legs, I just don't think that Rams secondary can hold up. And I think with how reliant the offense has been through Puka, even though Devontae did make contributions, I don't know if going through Devontae as a number 1 with the rest of those receivers that really aren't proven is going to be a winning formula for the game. Because I think Kyron's going to have a tough time running as well. Should be a great game. Then I'm going to take the Eagles at home, and I just trust that offensive line to hold the Rams pass rush. And I think unless the Eagles still are just playing really concerned, I think Jalen should be able to find opportunities against that Rams defense to win games, especially against that secondary. So that's like Philadelphia here, -3.5. Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Bucks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the New York Jets. This one to me, it was fairly easy. Like the Bucks, very good football team. They have had 2 come from behind road wins against the Falcons and the Texans. Baker Mayfield, is coming through in the clutch. Very, good, consistent, play from him. Bucky Irving's been good. Emike Ibuka kind of cost me in fantasy, and that's a whole different conversation. But it wasn't all him. But the Bucks to me just look consistent. They're gritty. They can run the ball. They have a good enough pass rush. The secondary does concern me. Like there were moments where Nico and Dalton and C.J. Stroud was just throwing some long balls. And McLaughlin is a good kicker. You could argue he's above average. But, I just look at this Bucks team and this Jets team, and it's just like the Bucks at home coming off those 2 gritty wins, playing a Jet team that they're going to be motivated because they know that, okay, it's kind of like they had so much variance in the first 2 weeks where you're like, okay, are the Jets as great as they were in week 1? Absolutely not. But to be honest, even though I am a Fields skeptic or a significant skeptic of Justin Fields, I do not think he is that bad of a quarterback. So again, you're going to get the Jets back to the mean, but it's like, okay, if the Jets defense continues to play as badly as it has, with all the talent they've had, Baker and that offense, like, they're going to put up points. They're going to score consistently and often, to win this game. It could be interesting if the Jets, can run the ball, because that's basically the identity of their offense. But I just think that the Tampa Bay defense, for the most part, has, done a pretty good job against the run. The key thing that you've noticed is they've given up a lot of screen passes and more passing yards to running backs compared to rushing yards. So I don't think Breece Hall is going to have that big of a day. But we shall see. Again, like I think the Bucs here just even though the offensive line for the Bucs, they are going to get Wirfs back, but Luke Goddard would be the injury that I'd be the most concerned about due to how it looked. It seemed like it was nagging him, and that's something that you might want to just rest him. We can't wait for the bye. It's kind of like Landon Dickerson last year, where like he's just going to play through the pain, but I don't know if you want to give him a week off in that way. But I'm going to take Tampa here, home opener, better defense, better overall team, and I just think Baker, if if Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers could shred that defense with the weapons they had, the Tampa Bay offense with the weapons they have can easily do the same thing, if not better, at least through this weekend. So that's like Tampa Bay here -7 and Tampa Bay straight up. The next game, the Washington Commanders over the Las Vegas Raiders. This game to me comes down to I don't buy Geno. As someone that's a Geno hater, I'll fully admit it. That was glorious to watch. He screwed me in fantasy because but I don't want to go too far of a diatribe. But the Raiders have to have incredible remorse for giving Geno that $78 million contract because he's a bot. He's a bum. He sucks. Ashton Genty can't run the ball to save his life behind that offensive line, who has Austin Powers Johnson, who was out, but they can't run the ball. He can't get the ball to Brock Bowers. Geno kept just throwing heaves and lobs in double and triple coverage, and nobody seemed to care. The Raiders defense, because that's the thing, the Raiders defense last night played a very respectable game. After giving up 17 points in the first half, the Raiders gave up one field goal the rest of the game. But Geno and his stupid turnovers and his dumb decisions cost them that game. And, and I know if any Raider fans are out there, it's like, oh, you're bagging on him too hard. It's like, you bet against him week 1. Yeah, I didn't expect, a 390-yard game from him, Again, I kind of, think with the Commanders' defense that, and I'll say this now, I can make an argument Marcus Mariota is better than Geno Smith. And, I was talking to somebody earlier, they were like, oh, man, Marcus hasn't played in 5 years. Yeah, but look at their careers. That does matter. Marcus Mariota is not a bum backup. He's not. He's confident. He's got good mobility. He's, he knows the system. I think he has better receiving weapons. And he is the exact opposite of Geno. Where you might appreciate Geno's risk-taking, Marcus is not going to have those type of games that often. Okay? And I just think, Marcus Mariota in this game, if Jaden's in this game, I think this game kind of just rolls with the 3.5 points and, everybody's fine. But if Marcus plays, I think Marcus could outplay Geno. It's not that crazy to think about it. And the biggest problem I have for Raider fans, they're terrible, is that they're stuck with Geno this year. They signed their backup their 7th-round pick quarterback, Cam Miller, on the practice squad, and they have Kenny Tiny Hands Pickett as their backup quarterback. Boys and girls, that basically means that you're stuck with Geno. Geno can go full nuclear dung. He can play like nuclear dung, and nobody in Las Vegas is going to say, hey, let's give Kenny Pickett a chance, that is the worst thing, because that's where they should have drafted a young quarterback to give them some hope, because Geno is not going to be there that long, or they need to think of something different, because if he keeps playing like that, even in a Chip Kelly system, this is not going to end well. And I just think, again, he played that bad that even if the Raiders win, I don't think I'm going to look like an idiot if the Commanders win. The Raiders are not going to kick the tar out of the Commanders. I can guarantee you that. Even if Jane Daniels isn't there. But that's why I'm going with the Commanders, because I just feel like Mariota, they have better weapons. I think I trust Kingsbury with that system. And I just can't trust Geno in another road spot against a more competent quarterback than Drake May. So that's like Washington -3.5 and Washington straight up. The next game, the Atlanta Falcons over the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to take Atlanta here based on the fact that Atlanta, through 2 weeks, has played good, solid, competent football. Bijan's been fantastic, getting over 100-plus scrimmage yards in back-to-back games. Michael Penix hasn't turned the ball over. The Falcons defense drafting Pierce and the other first-round pick, and I'm sorry I couldn't think of his name, but they have played great. Defensively, they're consistent. John Parker Romo, who beat out the only Asian representation in Koo, and then Koo now is probably going to be out of a job, or he's the backup kicker, for them unless Parker gets hurt. The Falcons just have fundamentally better talent. I think the Falcons have been more consistent. They could be easily 2-0. And I just look at the Panthers, and I just go, the Panthers have been the worst team in football. After week 1, I thought it was the Dolphins, and I know, Panther fans can look at the second half, run back of, they almost had a chance to beat them. And I do want to give Ted McMillan a lot of credit. He's played very well. Xavier Legette, fun fact, he has had 8 targets, and he has less receiving yards for the season than anybody that's sitting down anywhere that's not playing football, which is a crazy thing to say, that I have more receiving yards than a former first-round pick out of South Carolina, Xavier Legette. But it's also just where, again, the Falcons, they just seem to have just been more consistent. I trust Penix with the weapons he has. The Falcons defense, I think, is going to terrorize Bryce Young, who lost Corbett and Hunt, two of their veteran offensive linemen to the injured reserve. So I think that's going to be a brutal moment. And I just, in this spot, I'm going to take the Falcons. Better run organization, more consistent talent, weapons. The A.J. Terrell injury will be big, and that will be kind of huge for the Ted McMillan fantasy owner, so that could be kind of an advantage there. But I just think the rest of what the Falcons have in pass rush wise, they should be able to comfortably win this game fairly easily. So that's why I like Atlanta here, -5, and Atlanta straight up. The next game, the Houston Texans over the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game to me comes down to the Jags should have stolen that game against Cincinnati on Sunday. That was awful. And the Duval man is not the sharpest knife in the tool, because the fact that he decided, as he was up 3, and said, hey, we're going to go for it on 4th down, just baffles my mind. Because, at that point, take the field goal and have Jake Browning drive the length of the field to at least give you a chance, even if he did that, to win the game. The fact that they let him go, hey, they were up 3 and then gave the ball back to the Jags, only up 3, which meant that if Browning scored, which he did, you'd be basically up, down 4 with about 30 seconds left. I don't think, Trevor Lawrence, who had 2 terrible interceptions, I was happy for De'Ami Brown, who caught a nice touchdown, and the Jags showed potential, and they had Joe Burrow out of the game. But the fact that they blew that game in that fashion just really tells you how inept that is. And look, I think Houston's kind of like a weaker version of Kansas City, to where it's Mahomes and Stroud. But you can look at the offense is struggling. I think Houston's only scored 28 points through 2 games, which is the lowest amount of points through 2 games in 8 years. Chubb has been able to have a couple nice splashes here, but they missed Mixon. But I just look at the Texans team and go, they are not out of the AFC South race by any chance. I think they can beat the Colts, and they can, they're going to start their journey upward, moving forward this weekend. Because I just feel like that Texan defense going up against that Jag offense, especially with Brian Thomas dealing with a wrist injury, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball that much. I think Stroud, watching how inept the Jags defense has been or shown in moments, and I know that, the Jacksonville formula is very simple. Double or triple team Nico and have CJ Stroud throw to anybody else. But they're not. I don't think they're going to do that. And I just think the Texans just are fundamentally going to run better. They're going to be able to make some throws. And I think that defense is going to be too suffocating for Trevor Lawrence. He's really never had that many consistent great games against that defense overall throughout his tenure with the Jags, just in general. And I just think the Texans are mad. They know that they could easily be, they should be a 1-1 football team. And I think they're going to take it on a Jags team that hasn't looked bad, but it's where the Texans, and you could say the record, the Jags have been better because they won. They beat Carolina. Carolina, I think, is the worst team in the league so far for 2 weeks. To me, I'm going to take Houston here. Better defense, better coach, better construction, and I think the Texans start their journey forward to the AFC South with this, a comfortable win here. Also, I just think it's crazy that it's a 1.5 point dog. So it's amazing that you get the Texans with points. So that's Houston here plus 1.5 and Houston straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the Denver Broncos. This game to me comes down to I'm going to take the better quarterback. Denver's defense was jarring and how bad it played, but I thought Denver's offense was fundamentally pretty solid. Bo Nix threw for 3 touchdowns. He did have that terrible pick to Cam Bynum with the celebration of the year, doing the blue bump with blue from the Colts. And the Chargers offensively, they played efficient offensively. But it was the defense that was the most impressive thing. They held the Raiders to 3 different field goals. They didn't even get in the end zone because Geno kept throwing them the ball. And look, Bo Nix is definitely prone to that. I do think there is the injury of Khalil Mack, who apparently has suffered a dislocated elbow. So he could come back sooner than later, I guess, depending on treatment or braces and all that. But I don't think he's going to play this week. So that is an advantage for the Broncos, but and I know it's the Chargers' home field, so it's SoFi Stadium, so home field advantage for the Los Angeles teams is kind of non-existent, depending on the fan base that's going out there. But in games like this, where I kind of think it's even in terms of talent and roster and coaching, from what you've seen, I'm going to take the better quarterback, and I mean that's been Justin Herbert over Bo Nix. I think this game, I think for the Broncos, if they somehow give up another 20-plus points, they should be concerned because I don't think Bo Nix has shown you through at least 2 weeks that he's playing nearly as consistently, or he's already had 3 turnovers already. But I think if Denver can, get a good enough pass rush against that Charger offensive line playing, right with a backup right tackles and Joe Walt had to move the left tackle, I think the Broncos the Broncos can be competitive, but in a game like this, I'm going to take the home team and the better quarterback, which to me sides with the Los Angeles Chargers. So that's like the Los Angeles Chargers here, -2.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. The next game, the Seattle Seahawks over the New Orleans Saints. This game comes down to me to where the Saints have been, to a lot of people's credit, to Kellen Moore's coaching credit, they've been a good watch. If you're a Saint fan and you've watched the Saints through 2 weeks of football, they put out a good, entertaining product. It's competitive, it's consistent. They are using what they have, and Spencer Rattler, much to my chagrin as a Shug stan, has played well enough that I don't think you can't necessarily blame Spencer Rattler for the 2 losses so far. He has played solid, consistent, turnover-free football. And he's not been any of the reason, or he's not been, I think, any of the reason why the Saints are 0-2. I would argue that's Blake Groupie, that's some defensive struggles, that's their defense letting Mac Jones throw for 370 yards, but I can't blame him. However, with that being said, I am still going to continue my streak of picking against the Saints until, Tyler Shug comes in, because I just don't think, at the end of the day, Kellen, you have to prove to me that you can win a football game. And I know you can say he has the worst roster in the league and competency is good enough, but but you need to show that you can win. And I just think with Seattle, who, again, I told people, I thought they were the 8th best team in the NFC. They were right there. And, Kenneth Walker had a great game. He ran for over 100 yards. The defense came up huge with 2 turnovers. Jason Myers kind of had an on game. I think he missed like a 30-yard field goal. JSN, had another fantastic game. Cooper Kupp finally came into the offense. It was what I've been trying to preach for. And he had 90 yards. And this Seahawks team just is a good, fundamentally consistent team on all, sides, and I just think they are better than the Seahawks. Sam has had his moments, Sam has had his struggles, Sam has had his turnovers, but just looking at this game, if Mac Jones can beat Spencer Rattler, I think Sam Darnold, with the weapons he has, can do the same thing. But I think the 7.5 points, they lost the game by 7 and 5, so I think the Seahawks, they're showing you that they have their moments where they can kind of collapse or have bad moments. So I'm going to give the Saints their due and say that they can cover the 7.5 point spread, at least on the spread wise. So that's why I like Seattle here straight up, and New Orleans plus 7.5. The next game, the Dallas Cowboys over the Chicago Bears. This comes down to me where Dak's going to be better than Caleb. And I think in a shootout, with the weapons you have, with the coaching that's there, with the roster that's there, because they almost look like identical teams. But it's because both defenses are awful. The Bears defense just gave up 52 to Detroit, who ran up and, who threw, ran, and did everything they wanted to, every which way, frontward, backward, sideways, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, northwestern, northeastern, whatever direction you wanted against the Lions. The Lions did whatever they wanted against the Bears. Where the Giants and Cowboys, the fact that you let Russell Wilson have almost a career game that basically saved the talking media for at least this week about him getting his job taken, it just comes down to me where, in a shootout, I saw Dak, win this game in these spots. The Bears, Caleb, he hasn't played great, and I do think he's made some idiotic, wild throws, and the offense at times has looked very clunky and awkward. But in a game like this, where you kind of expect both teams to be able to try to, win a shootout, you have to kind of go with the better quarterback in this spot. I think it's Dak. And I just think, again, the biggest difference is also, I just think the Cowboys defense is a little bit better than the Bears. because you still have to look at that one quarter from the Bears defense. Look at J.J. McCarthy's 7 quarters against the Bears defense compared to, the other 7 quarters. The fact that Bears made J.J. look that good as to what you saw everything else look as inept as it is telling me that I think the Cowboys defense, even if you put, I don't think they would have made J.J. look that good. I think the Cowboys should have a little bit of a better run defense with Kenny Clark. I think they have, better receivers. And I'm just going to trust that Brian's got to win. Brian's been around the league more often. Brian knows what he has. Also, the Bears' defense is just ravaged with injuries with T.J. Edwards and Jalen Johnson having a groin injury. He's out indefinitely. Could the Bears win this one? Sure. If Caleb has coming out, a throw party and everybody in Chicago gets, one great thrill, I wouldn't be that surprised. That's how bad but also, again, you have the Eberflus revenge factor as well, as Ed Eberflus is going back to Chicago for the first time since he was fired last Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving. But, in this one, when you have a game like this where you kind of look at both teams, once again, I'm going to go with the quarterback. And to me, that's just the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys, through 2 weeks, have looked much more effective and consistent than I think Chicago Bears have been. So that's like Dallas here, +1, and Dallas straight up. The next game, the Arizona Cardinals over the San Francisco 49ers. This one here, I'm just going to go with Kyler will outplay Mac Jones. And I know you could say, why are you, going to quarterbacks? I feel like, sometimes rosters are just significantly different where the quarterback doesn't matter, the Bills with their injuries or stuff like that. But it's if you think the rosters are about the same or, in their current situations, I think the quarterback kind of has to be the tiebreaker. And look, I thought Mac Jones was better than Spencer Rattler. He did outplay Spencer Rattler, and they won the game off of that. I think in this instance, Kyler Murray, who has played pretty much solid football, that 1 4-quarter interception would kind of irritate me. And it would irritate me that they were up 20 and decided to keep throwing the ball when they had James Conner, who was a solid running back. But, in this game, it's okay, Mac Jones, you beat Spencer Rattler, something that people kind of expected. If you could beat Kyler Murray, now the point of the Brock Purdy contract will start coming back up. Where it's okay, Mac Jones is looking like Brock Purdy. And they're not going to get rid of Brock Purdy, but if you're going to start looking going man, we just gave that guy a contract, and he has his version of turf toe, but we're winning games with Mac Jones. And again, if I was Mac Jones' agent, I'd say, hey, stay in San Francisco. We've seen you in New England. We've seen you in Jacksonville. If you can benefit from being the guy that backs up Brock Purdy, and if you play well enough for that many games, then you can take your opportunity to get your next contract as long as you stay the backup there. But in this game, I just feel like the Cardinals, even though they're dealing with injuries in the secondary, I don't think Mac is going to have that many opportunities with the weapons he has to throw in that context. And I just think Kyler Murray outplays Mac Jones in a real interesting competitive NFC West battle between two 2-0 teams. So should be a great game. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco won because then Kyle Shanahan could easily outcoach John McGann in a variety of ways. But I'm going to take the Cardinals here just because I believe they have the better quarterback in this regard over Kyler over Mac Jones. So then the final 2 games, the Kansas City Chiefs over the New York Giants. I'm taking Kansas City here based on the fact that I think the Chiefs, they're playing the Giants defense. The Giants defense, unless that Chiefs offensive line cannot protect him long enough to get pass rush, but even then, you saw Mahomes with his legs. I think Patrick can make enough moves with his legs that even with Juju and Tyquan and Travis, he should be able to move the ball more effectively than how Russ will against the Chiefs defense. I also just think if they pretty much don't play zone or let Russ not throw vertical after vertical after vertical, Russ is not really a guy that he basically has two over the last couple of years. He's basically had 2 kind of systems. Either he's going to check it down and you're going to just incrementally go game by game by game, check down by check down by check down, or Russ is just going to just throw moon ball after moon ball after moon ball. And I just think the Chiefs secondary is too good that they're not going to let Russ keep throwing the ball over their heads over and over and over again. Look, I think the Chiefs, they should be thrilled, and they have one more tough game coming up in this first quarter against the Ravens in a rematch of Week 1 and a rematch of the conference title game a couple years ago. And they could lose that one, even in Kansas City. But this is the game where they need to get the get-right game as, the 6-point favorite against a Giant team that, looked more respectable after a week, but I feel like after this performance, we're going to be looking at the Jackson Dart conversation being much more amplified, unless Russ again puts up another 300-plus yard game to where it's like you can bench him because they're not winning, but you can't say that it was Russ's fault in the loss if he keeps putting up solid numbers. I guess except the turnovers. So that's what I can't see here, -6. I can't see straight up. And lastly, the Baltimore Ravens over the Detroit Lions. It comes down to, I think the Detroit Lions are not as bad as they were week 1, but they're not as good as they've been in week 2. The Ravens, they have pretty much shown they can consistently offensively put up points. The Lions defense, I just don't think. I think the Ravens defense should be able to hold the Lions offense enough against the run and against the pass, and I just think the Ravens offense can shred that Lions defense with the weapons they have. I think Lamar's athleticism, and also the other key stat that's important: Lamar has never lost a game in the NFC besides the teams that had Saquon Barkley. So a big primetime spot. The last time the Ravens played the Lions, we absolutely rolled them in a laugher of a game. I don't think the Lions. I think they're better than that. But I think it's where I think the Ravens win by 7 to 14 points. I think that could happen. Just how the Ravens are. Like the Ravens know this kind of moment. It's a good way to build back some confidence. But I think with the injuries to the Lions the Ravens secondary does have injuries. So if the Lions can generate or the offensive line can hold up, it can be a unique shootout. But in that in this type of game, let Derrick Henry run, let Lamar kind of go on his continued dominant success, and I'm just going to take the Ravens at home in the darkness in a blackout type game. I think the Ravens should be able to kind of fundamentally just place more sound, more consistent, and quality football. That I think the Ravens will get the win. And I'm not being a homer. So that's all, like Baltimore here, -6, and Baltimore straight up. But that is it. So those are all my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page. Check out people like Andrew Warren, Half Moon's Picks, Bridgewater's Finest. There's the Goat House. Check the CBS Sports Picks out. Please check out that Facebook page. A lot of guys and gals make predictions just like I do every week. It's always been fun. It's always great. And once again, like I said, the video for week 4 will be coming out this Tuesday, just because of the bus, and then I will keep letting people every week know as I get my schedules of when the videos probably come out moving forward in that regard. So that's it. So best of luck to all players, coaches, fellow prognosticators, and fantasy football players. And until next week for my week 4 video, this is Matt the Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.